Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome to the Naked Ambition podcast, where we speak with the people around the world who are making a difference in tech, innovation, and leadership all around the world. So I am your host, Fiona Triarca. On the show today, I'm so excited about this episode, and so is the whole team at Naked Ambition. We are joined by Ashleigh Morris, the CEO of Choreo. Hi, Ashleigh. How are you going?
Good. Hi, everyone.
So I'm going to give Ash a bit of an intro. So this is probably one of the most impressive bios I've ever read on the show. So I'm just going to preface this so, for all of you who are tuning in, brace yourselves out there. So Ashleigh Morris is the CEO of Choreo. They are an award-winning company who advise and guide industry and the government through their circular economy aspirations. And this is both at a strategic level, but also down to the operational level as well. So Ashleigh herself is bold in her pursuit of systemic change. She has been acknowledged as a future leader and was recently presented with the Young Business Person of the Year award by the Lord Mayor of Brisbane. She's been recognised as a top 100 corporate social responsibility influential leader. She's a Prime Minister's scholar, an Australian ASEAN emerging leader. She's an invitee to the 73rd United Nations General Assembly and an Alan MacArthur Foundation of the Circular Economy Champion, which is a title that's actually only granted to a handful of people worldwide. So congratulations on that. In her recognition of her strategic foresight experience, she's also met with Australian Prime Ministers, she's been invited on trade missions, and she's represented Australia as a panellist at the World Circular Economy Forum in 2019. So it's fair to say she's a bit of an expert on the circular economy. Welcome so much to the show, Ashleigh Morris.
Thank you for having me and for sharing that, very long bio. But it is certainly nice to receive recognition in our country for our work. So thank you.
Yeah, you should be super proud. So Ashleigh, this topic of the circular economy popping up more and more and more. We're seeing it everywhere. It's sort of permeating our world in the innovation space. I know that it's something that a lot of purpose-led companies are becoming a lot more focused on. Do you reckon you could start, just for anyone out there who's sort of new to the concept, could you start with a bit of a definition of what are we talking about when we talk about the circular economy?
Yes, and I think this is such a good opportunity. So I'm very glad you actually asked me to start with that, because I think the rhetoric in Australia is, if you've heard of the circular economy, people will think it's quite synonymous with recycling. Let me say it's not. That's a very small part of the model. So the circular economy, by definition, it's an economic performance-based model that's designed to be restorative and regenerative. It has three key principles. These are globally adopted. The first is to design out waste and pollution, not get creative with designing with it. We want to design it out. The second principle is how do we keep products and materials at their highest value for as long as possible. And then that third principle is how do we regenerate our natural systems. Now, for us at Choreo, we focus on not only just our natural ecological systems, but also our social systems, really bringing in that human focus as well. Now, if you remember nothing else, those three principles of a circular economy are what you need to take forward. You can reframe them and use them as questions like, as a business, how do we design out waste and pollution? How do we keep product and material at its highest value? It could be like new commercial strategies, innovative tech coming in. And how do we regenerate the natural system? So it is quite simple, it's quite logical, but when you start to think and ask those questions, you do see that it's horizontal and it's also vertical in its application and can be applied to any industry, which is where I think people do struggle because of its breadth and depth of application, that often we find once they understand what it is, they're like, whoa, where do we start and how do we start this journey towards circularity?
So good, and so good to kind of break down. It's a lot in there as well, because there is some complexity as well about what you're saying, presumably for organizations and that concept of application. Can you walk us through like what does that actually look like if an organization actually wants to take this on?
Sure.
How do they do it?
Sure. I'll give you two examples that, from when we started our journey as a company, which was 4 years ago. So I'll give you a really basic application of circular economy, and then I'll give you one that's much more systemic and on a global commodity.
Love it.
So 4 years ago, when we started our very aptly titled pilot project, the Circular Experiment, we were working on one city street with a group of small to medium-sized business. Now, there were 9 cafes on that street. Each were selling coffee grounds, or selling coffee that was then resulting in spent coffee grounds. That was typically going into the, your general waste and then into landfill. So for us, from a circular perspective, we're like, how do we capture that clean material, these spent coffee grounds, and find a higher value application? How could that actually regenerate our natural system, like our soils? So we looked for industries on the Sunshine Coast where this project was based. We identified a local farmer who was growing microherbs and flowers. She was already selling her produce to this particular street where those cafes were operating. And so we're like, great, there's a logistics network already set up. She's coming there twice weekly on her regular delivery run. So we're like, how do we actually then collect the coffee grounds? So we got secondhand plasterers buckets. We put them into each of those 9 cafes. They put their coffee grounds in there. The farmer collected it. She added it to her soil on her farm, reducing her cost of buying in any other organic matter to improve her soil. And then she sold additional microherbs and flowers into the street. It's a nice closed loop model of how do we capture what is considered a waste product out of one industry or set of businesses, have value added to it by going into soils to create produce that's then sold back in a different form, in this case, in microherbs and flowers. A nice, simple example that most businesses, if you're a retail or hospitality-based business, you could get involved in and do. This saved businesses money because they were no longer putting coffee grounds, which are quite a heavy material, into their general waste, and also a massive reduction in emissions, because anything like coffee grounds or food waste, it generates methane, not carbon emissions in the first instance, which are 24 times more potent to our atmosphere. So big wins. And also it obviously created additional revenue for that farmer who was selling those microherbs and flowers, because she got more customers, because she was connecting that not only with one business, but 9. So really simple, cost no one money, but save them money and created opportunity. So then I'd like to scale it up. We're 4 years into our journey and we're working with some of the world's largest companies, particularly some of our large mining sector clients, which you might be like, okay, what role do they have in a circular economy? They are classified typically as an extractive, very wasteful industry. And you would be right in that classification, but actually they're very much transforming to be more of a development industry and providing the materials we need to make transitions in our energy, like renewables, that use a huge amount of metals actually to create those technologies in the first place. So if we're working with one of the world's largest mining companies now, not only looking at their production, so how do they produce metal, but also the consumption of metal into the global marketplace. So typically mining is very wasteful, but what we looked to do was actually work with this company to help support them and bring in more innovative and circular approaches to developing a copper cathode, so the metal product, that had a very low carbon footprint and also didn't use any virgin content. So this copper actually is produced from 2 forms of mine waste, and it doesn't use any primary material, and it can clean up old and abandoned mine sites that are really hazardous, because mining practices do produce something that's called tailings, which can be very risky if it's not managed safely. So this technology is quite remarkable in the sense that it produces a very high quality metal from waste only, and uses a lot of other byproducts from the mining industry to create this really low carbon copper. And so what we wanted to do then, if you were producing such an incredible product, how do we direct it in the supply chain so it can contribute additional benefits? So we directed it to other companies downstream, like those that are producing low carbon technologies, maybe an electric vehicle, maybe a wind turbine. And then once it goes into that product, we questioned, well, could we bring it back and leverage the infrastructure that some of these mining companies have and reprocess it, essentially creating a cyclical cycle for metal. Metal is a perfectly suited material for circular economy because it can be reprocessed infinitely with very, very small losses in the metal over time. So for us, it's about a more systemic entire supply chain focus on one particular global commodity that is set to exponentially grow. So you can see how there's applicability at the smallest scale for a material like coffee grounds through to something that's being primarily produced through major mining entities all around the world at the moment.
How do you go articulating the value in that case? So in that example, particularly in that larger mining scalable example, because I can imagine, like even when you were speaking about the smaller one, I'm like, okay, so this is actually at the operational level, when you say that's what you do, this is going to be a whole supply chain challenge of where do we actually look for the opportunities in each step. So, throughout your journey over the last 4 years, are you seeing a shift in organizations' appetite for this? Is this something that now they're saying, we want this help, or is this you going, this is what you need to do? How does that?
Yeah, is it a push or a pull?
Yeah.
I think so. When we started 4 years ago in this country, no one really knew what the circular economy was. Actually, there was probably only a handful of people that were using the terminology. But I would still say that the maturity in understanding the model wasn't there. And I mean, that was the catalyst for us to start that pilot project that I mentioned, that coffee ground example from. So when we were talking about it, we were talking into a vacuum. It was just like, hello, anyone care? Like circular
you need
what?
To care. You should.
Yeah, circular what? But at the end of the day, I think we learned so much. People often say to us, how did you engage those businesses on the street? Gosh, did we learn about how to, listen and learn and then try to define what was in it for them. That is always the question it comes back to. What's in it for me? And I think to be able to answer that, you need to be able to listen to where the opportunities might be within that particular company, that particular street or the context. And you also need to, be very aware of what you think you could do and how does the circular economy tools, principles, business models enable you to present an opportunity to them to address that challenge. So I will say 2017, speaking into a vacuum, learned a lot through walking up to businesses, shaking their hand, kind of cold call, hey, we want to test this concept in practice. And we got such a cold engagement initially, and then it just grew and grew and grew and got up to 45 businesses out of the 56 in total that were on that street, which we're very proud about. But now fast forward to today, and I would say in the last 18 months, catalytic enormous growth for the interest in the circular economy, not only here in our country, but internationally. Europe and the UK have been advanced in this space for a long time, so has China. They're a very intelligent economy in how they manage the stocks and flows of resources and materials. But I will say there's a pull. It's not a push at all. And it's coming from the boards. It's coming from the shareholders and executive teams. Now, people often say to us, are you engaged by sustainability departments? No, not often. We're engaged by corporate strategy, strategy,
CSR.
Business development. Yeah. But it's definitely not sitting in an environment portfolio, and it to be honest, it shouldn't.
Yeah,
it's an economic model that has benefit to the environment and society when designed right. And I think so on that basis, we have an opportunity to really design outcomes that are systemic because they're at the heart of how we operate and the considerations we make for our economy and people and business. But I'm very, we've never had to push this agenda. We've been very fortunate that we've grown by word of mouth, and we've never, say, been part of grant programs, or it's been word of mouth and it's been customers. And we often say you can't be in the green if you're in the red. And so, we've had a very incredible journey. And I think it's about transparency and honesty. You may not be able to answer every question, but you can present possibilities. So I think it's powerful. And I'm really excited to see the growth that's happening more broadly on circular economy at the moment.
Yeah. So smart. And just also working side by side with people rather than you're trying to pretend that, we've got all of these solutions, or even just like what I love, even hearing just hearing you speak about this in the brief time that we have, is also how tangible those outcomes are. It's not coming up with, again, which I think sometimes in corporate social responsibility, it's a bit like we need to do this, or we have to do this, or it's about optics, or if it is in that area, whereas these are things that we really want to do. That's the business benefit. It's highly strategic. It's a business model opportunity or even an innovation opportunity is another way to look at it. And then the benefits then there are some green benefits to it. And also being, partnering with mining companies rather than taking the stance of, I'm not going to go near it because I don't believe in what's happening there, but then I may be a beneficiary of some of the, the outputs of these organizations.
Yeah, we need to go there, in terms of like those sectors that are, I don't know, they just get such a bad rap, but none of us can separate ourselves from mining and the metals and minerals that come into our economy right now. I mean, you'd be avoiding the truth if we were doing that, So it's about how do we ask new questions of these industries and how do we support them, as you said, side by side to achieve real outcomes, not framing, not optics, but outcomes. And by not promising that everything is possible, but rather exploring what is. And I think people also like say, what is your secret to success? But I think it's extremely based on soft skills, trust and rapport, which supports the ability to explore, what might be possible. And we use an economic model, which is the circular economy, and it's called Principles Supporting Business Models, as that toolkit for change. So, we have a model, we have a process, but then it all really comes back to human-centered relationships. And people are like, oh, I was hoping it was like innovative tech and I'm like, that's a compliment. That's an enabler. It is really human-centered and soft skills driven, listening, learning, and then guiding, and just being honest in the transition.
Yeah. Love hearing that. What's some of the untapped potential or the big opportunities that are getting you and the team excited at Corio around the circular economy?
Well, again, I love the mining and resources sector just because of scale. I mean, I know there's a focus on, I love War on Waste. If anyone listening was, seen that series that came out a couple of years ago, that was so catalytic for change. And I know the executive producer, phenomenal program, but it brought light to things like coffee cups, and the whole of Australia was like, wow, we've got to do something about coffee cups. And yes, we do. But when we start to look at the scale of some industries in comparison to coffee cups and the scale of the impact and the very real impact, for us, that's where there's an untapped opportunity. Is there, how do we allow everyday people to understand where our efforts are best placed? We can't do it all, and we can't do it alone. And I think there's a lack of understanding more broadly on where are our priority areas to focus and how do we get behind, making change and supporting those that are already in the arena and actually supporting that change, alongside these companies, and not greenwashing, but genuinely in there, again, with honesty and transparency about doing something. So mining and resources, totally untapped. I think a broader education on impact areas that we should be focusing on as citizens in Australia and more abroad. But also I think if we had fantastic, and I'm going to be bold and say it, if we had a female leader as the head of our country, I think that would change the game. And I think seeing examples like Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister for New Zealand, I think what could happen for Australia if we had a similar leader with a similar ethos, we would just be completely different in our position, our strategic position, I will say, globally. And I think the value that each of us place on feeling like we're being heard, within our government. So they're the things I'm excited about, and I think it's possible. So hopefully we'll see some great leadership come through.
Why do you think we need a female leader to propel some of this change that needs to happen through the circular economy?
If you look globally, but even here in Australia, what we're seeing is most leaders that are really having successful systemic outcomes, because I think inherently women's style of leadership considers all aspects, social, economic, and environmental. Around the world, most of the circular economy agenda is being led by women. And again, new CEOs that are stepping in, there's actual really good statistics. I can't reference them and I won't because I'll probably butcher it. But they're really showing that a female-led style of leadership is producing outcomes very much aligned to the principles of circular economy or ESG or CSR, but are, you know, it's an inclusive journey towards, you know, a different way of operating. And I think that's the power that we could have again if we had a female leader. And also just think that relatability. It's no longer about an egocentric approach. It's about actually wanting to uplift the many and support and take people along a journey versus that when we talk about it, you know, when I say egocentric, it's quite a direct, this is what we shall do and this is the decision we have made, versus it being inclusive and celebrating diversity in a process towards, you know, better outcomes.
Yeah.
So I just think, yeah, the way women lead is quite different in the considerations we make and the way we lead.
Or a feminine style, even maybe
feminine style.
Get a bloke to embody a little bit of the feminine style, or balance it up if we want to be diverse. I know what you mean. Yeah, I do know what you mean. Amazing. So tell us, you know, obviously Naked Ambition, we're all about design-led innovation here. You know, where do you think organizational innovation should be focused in this space, or even like what excites you? Not to go, like, it doesn't have to be down the kind of tech road necessarily, but is there anything that's sort of emerging and possibilities when it comes to innovation and the circular economy that you see?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the core principle again for a circular economy, you know, it's designed to be restorative and regenerative. And when we talk about design being so fundamental, you know, that again, you know, no one entity, no prime minister alone, or no one, you know, major, you know, monopoly company can do this. Like, so we need so many people to embody a philosophy of innovation, you know, within their companies. So I think what excites me is that we're seeing a lot more processes being established internally that enable teams, you know, from an operational level to bring an idea forward that has a pathway through to implementation, or a pathway through to an executive decision to be made, whether they're going to take that forward. And I think previous to that, you know, innovation sat as maybe a thing that needs to happen inside of a lab, whether that's a lab like a science-based lab, or whether it was a lab for an ideation process, you know, something that's external to the company, not core process. So that excites me because I think we're seeing it in local governments, we're seeing it at all scales of business, which is we need an innovation process that supports and gives home to ideas that we generate internally based off the intelligence we know about how we operate today and what we could do differently, just creating space for it and pathways forward for it. So that's the good outcomes, and we absolutely need it because we need design thinking at the heart of this. It's not, when you're trying to change this economic model from linear to circular, that is a hard task. I mean, and a good analogy is often it's a fast moving train. How do you step off that train without breaking every bone in your body? And that, you know, and it's very real because the flow is so linear. The flow of materials, the flow of money in our system is very entrenched.
Yeah.
So if you want to go against that or try to get off of that, it's a very real, you know, consideration that needs to be made about how do we design to our steps forward that aren't going to see our company lose value, but rather create value against the current. You know, it's...
Absolutely. And that's why you keep on saying, you know, you've got to use a whole systemic approach. You've got to think about the causality of each of those actions. And presumably as well, I would imagine that generates a bit of fear in some of those organizations because you're trying to break something that fundamentally, probably from an economic level, works. You know, especially when you're looking at a supply chain that may have been established for the last 50 years. I don't know, something similar.
Yeah, or longer.
You know?
I mean,
longer. These mining companies, and now they've got to be brave enough to challenge that, which is pretty...
But I think you need a healthy level of fear, though, as long as it's a healthy type of fear. Yeah. Because it generally means you care. You're paying attention. You're in the journey. You know, you're like, buckle in, here we go. You know, there's an intention behind it. So I think, you know, fear can actually be a really good thing. And, you know, why wouldn't you have a little bit of that? Because it's a very big and powerful step in a different direction that you should be taking and you need to take, but it doesn't discredit the fact that, you know, it could be scary and it can change quite a lot of things and a lot of outcomes for companies. So yeah, I think as long as it's healthy and managed and there's clarity in where you're going and why, your purpose of doing it is clear, and, you know, that can aid that fear.
Propel you. Like you said, it's a bit of a catalyst. So staying on that topic of fear, but from a personal perspective, like what are some of the biggest challenges? What are the things you as a team are throwing around going, oh, this is something we're a bit concerned about, or this is a big challenge that we've got to overcome?
I think for anyone in my space, so I'm an environmental scientist by qualification. And I think if you look at our ticking time frame for addressing climate related emissions, global warming, you go, okay, we've got, under 10 years, and then you think about the interventions that are being made, whilst good, there's a very real concern about, are we going to really get ahead of this? And are we really going to get our temperature down in time before we start collectively feeling the consequences of our economic model and its externalities, which is climate, which is modern slavery, which is enormous amounts of waste, so I have a healthy fear around that, but I use it as a motivator. It's not disabling me, nor is it taking away the hope that I still hold, but it is a very real thing that I'm cognizant of, you could say. But also I think just on challenges as a company, we want to just do more every day. And, we each get 24 hours, and I believe in the power of the individual. I believe in the power of the collective equally. And I think as a small company, we've kept ourselves deliberately small, focusing on quality over quantity, but there is this, I think for anyone that runs a small but impact-led or purpose-driven business, there's this friction of like, I want to take on everything and I want to realize every opportunity, but we need to always focus on outcomes and knowing how when you want to achieve the best outcomes, you need to focus on quality, not quantity. So I think there's that friction internally, just on a personal journey, running this company alongside my sister with what is a powerful team of 7 phenomenal women. But, a very real, like, okay, what is our future trajectory? Where are we best placed? And what does growth look like for us in the work that we do? And we've collectively decided to really just focus, again, quality over quantity, and grow sustainably. But we know where we're best placed. We know what the biggest value we can contribute is, and they're healthy questions to ask. But I think that is a really real challenge, and it's not one we face alone. So many other industries are in the same boat as us.
Absolutely. And especially when you are genuinely taking that human-centered, design-led approach that you're talking about. Sometimes you don't know how big this thing is going to be or the direction that it's going to go in. You're not rocking out with your kind of carbon copy process, even though you may have your methodology and everything that, as you said, your toolkit and your business models that you fall back on. You are in the realm of the unknown and also the possibility, and trying to balance that in a big organization, I imagine.
How do you quote for that? Let's explore possibilities. Let's quote for that. Like, how many hours? I mean, that's just like, but that's a real thing. There's, that's the honest and transparent journey. And I think it's, again, if you can have very real conversations with those people you're going on the journey with, these companies, which are really just led by people, you can have conversations about, hey, I don't know what that looks like, and set up models that financially support that type of approach, not fixed fee, not structured core deliverables, but allowing for innovation, allowing for possibility, an exploration and a journey towards something else. But we can't tell you what that is, that is a battle of our work, but a very real thing that, again, it's not just us in that challenge, but, it's good to talk about it though, because I don't think people talk about it enough. And we all just try to conform to boxes when it's like square peg, round hole.
Yeah.
Deal with that.
And enormously dependent on the trust element that you just mentioned before, and those super strong relationships of a great internal sponsor or a stakeholder that really gets it and isn't just looking for a fast win to say this is a deliverable or this is my KPI or whatever. That's really, I imagine it's that career shift kind of moment for somebody that this is probably one of the biggest things they'll do.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people feel like that. We, as a separate part of our company, we teach a masterclass on the circular economy, and terrifies us, but a lot of people actually quit their job after and they start a whole new chapter, or they found a new business. And I think it's because I think when people really grasp this concept, whether it's an internal project stakeholder for us, they really see what what it could do and what it will mean if it's successful. And I think people holistically and wholeheartedly get behind it. And that's, really, really powerful, and that's a huge amount of trust that we place, in each other in that relationship, and making sure that, that we support the entire system change that needs to happen, plus the individual that's taking that very bold and ambitious step and being quite courageous, in all honesty.
Yeah. That was actually a question I wanted to cover with you, for people who have tuned into this and are thinking, being curious about circular economy and maybe feel even a bit inspired about what you've just covered. I do. What is the role of the individual in an organisation, or the possibility? I can even see, I think there's probably a few startup opportunities that are triggered, once people understand this, because a lot of innovation does come from the supply chain and looking at things you can do there. But what are the sort of things that you talk to people about in that masterclass, about the individual impact that you can have if you're in an organisation?
Yeah, I think in the masterclass, the first thing we like to teach people is, what is the economy? And because we all talk about it, and it's this big thing that we feel separate to. We never talk about it as part of. So the first thing is, let's understand the problem. I love a quote by Albert Einstein where he's like, if I had 60 minutes, I'd spend the first 55 understanding the problem, and then I'd know what question to ask myself. And I think that's so powerful. So for us, it's how do we support people to understand our current economy, so they have confidence around that, they're informed. And then on the basis of being informed, how do we give them visibility to this new economic model, being the circular economy, and give them the principles and the business models to take that away as an individual, whether that's going back into their home, back into their business, or either running their business, being part of community, and actually starting to use those tools to create change. And like I said, the most simple application and things we encourage our participants, but anyone we interact with, to do is those 3 key principles. Frame them as a question. How can we design out waste and pollution? And what that can spark, whether you're taking that internally or into a supply chain, is phenomenal. For example, we're working with Hydro Tasmania, which is a large renewable energy generator and the largest, water body manager in Australia. They asked that question of their supply chain, and automatically they were able to design out waste. Just like that, by asking them, is that possible? How can we design it? Like, oh, we could use reusable crates for all of your deliveries. They're like, wow, okay. Instead of actually thinking about how do we better manage and get outcomes from recycling, they don't have to even think about recycling anymore, and they're saving money and doing better by the environment, and they have a stronger customer relationship with their supplier. Yeah. Simple way to use those principles and questions as an individual to do something meaningful and affect change.
Solve the right problem before you solve the problem right. That's what we talk about in design thinking. That's very good. That's exactly what you're doing there. Yeah, so interesting. What about for organizations? So if this was, we've got CEOs and MDs sort of thinking, what should I be looking at, or where would I even start if it was my organization? How would you typically engage early on for an organization that's really fresh to this topic, but has a leader that has appetite for it?
I think, one, they need baseline information. And I say that, and I'll caveat it with, most people, they can be ahead of a business, but we still lack understanding of where our consumption is, like how much energy are we consuming, how much water, how much waste are we generating, what is our key customer base and what do they want? Our data in this country across so many different companies is pretty poor and pretty limited, and we rely on other people, like maybe external contractors like waste companies, to provide us that data, but it's often really poor. So I think as a leader, if you're interested in this space, it's about actually, do you have a really good baseline understanding of consumption patterns, your key market growth opportunities? And then I would start to overlay that with the circular economy principles and business models again, and start to see, hey, can we design out some of our problems here? Could we increase market growth over there by a new commercial strategy or a strategic partnership with a very values-aligned customer? Can we pioneer, a new product together, or a new service as related to our product? It's there's so much possibility in this, but I think it needs to always be grounded in a really good baseline or foundational understanding of your operation, your team, your market, your customer base, as well as in getting the tools to do something about it. But also speaking, I think one thing is I really want to encourage people, don't ever forget the finance element of this, because circular economy is not just about products and materials and managing the stocks and flows of those.
Yeah.
We need to think about finance and how it's the fuel of the linear, but it'll also be the fuel of the circular economy. So what are those new financial relationships and partnerships, or just better visibility to our shareholders that tells them this is a better way to operate and this is why? Again, that outcomes driven values, forward, or, creating approach that we need. We need that sector particularly to increase its maturity in regards to circular economy.
Smart advice. I mean, this is what's interesting about it. I think it's probably reframed how people, even just hearing that, may think about when is the right time for them to do it, because what you're asking people to do there is unpacking the whole strategy. It's not just going, hey, this thing, circular economy is cool, this is going to be great. If we start doing that, I'm going to put Sally on the case. Actually, like
poor Sally. Seriously.
But it is going to be presumably it's very much aligned with innovation strategy as well. Like it needs to go lockstep with you wanting to question everything.
Yeah.
Where are we actually going? What does that future look like? What are the possibilities? What are those market opportunities? What's underutilized?
Exactly. Yeah. But you just have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
They just have to start somewhere. Again, we are talking core strategy, core business.
Yeah.
But, just get started. The biggest thing around circular economy is if you actually don't action it, you get no value from it. You can talk about it all you want till you're blue in the face. The value will come from its implementation, truly. Education really matters, but so does the practice of putting it into action. So we need both.
Yeah.
And so I think just encouraging business leaders to get started is fundamental here.
And even using your sort of startup, that localized first case study that you gave, but thinking about that at a micro level inside an organization could be a starting point. It's just, got a few people running these projects, put this lens on it, give it a go, start to look at how it could be adapted for our organization. And cool. So tell us a little bit about, let's project us into the future a bit. I mean, we've talked about, where you were 2017 as an organization, then sort of where you are now. Maybe from, even from just maybe a more societal view of like, where do you want to see us when it comes to circular economy in the next 10 years? You could take this for Australia, we could take this globally, big question, but like, what's Ashleigh's grand vision for where we really need things to go?
Well, it would be really nice, as a part of that grand vision, to have our economy be considered circular, which means we're managing the stocks and flows in Australia, but also those that we export, understanding where they're going, the value they're generating, and who's getting the value, financially, environmentally, and socially. Right now, we don't have that visibility, and the economy's gotten so big and complex and, overdrawn that, we're really lacking a tangible understanding of what we're contributing, what our impact is, etc. So I think when we can actually look at our economy and say, we know where those flows are going, the value they're generating, and to whom, that will be a very powerful future for us, because then we can actually make strategic direction on do we need to change something in relation to that? Because our linear economy right now benefits the 1% and not the 99. That's its default. And that, and that for all of the value fiscally or financially that's generated, only going to 1%, but the negative externalities, again, modern slavery, climate or global warming, waste, being felt by all of us, but only 1% getting a financial value, that's not a good equation. So the future needs to be that we all get value and we design out those negative externalities. We need to make sure we have a system that's no longer extractive, but in which circulates value in every sense of the word. I mean, that's what looks, exciting in the future, if we can get there.
Yeah. Who would you point to now? You mentioned China before, is actually making great ground when it comes to circular economy. Who else do you look to in terms of other geographies that are paving the way, I guess, for this?
Finland.
Yeah.
Finland, again, great leadership by women, but no, not just women. but yeah, Finland, the UK, Scotland, the Netherlands, they have a commitment as a country. This is the Netherlands, to be 100% circular.
Yeah.
Incredibly powerful. And yes, that's a big target, but then you filter down, they have like core sectors which then have their own targets, and they've brought in industry, they've changed procurement. And not only are they changing their roles and their structures in government, legislative, regulatory of procurement, they're also supporting that change by getting outside of their direct operations. So working with companies to make sure they can actually provide a circular service or a circular product to be procured, not just changing procurement and expecting the market to conform. So, I think that's where I see a really smart approach to developing a circular economy. Again, you can't just pull one lever and expect everything to change. It's just not how it's going to work. We need our companies and our governments that form our infrastructure and economy to come together and rethink that operating system itself. That's, and these countries around the world, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. They've done a lot of the hard yards. The circular economy term was coined over 10 years ago now. And some of these countries have been, they're a decade ahead of us, if not even further culturally.
Yeah.
So, again, Australia, we are very wealthy as a small nation with a small population. We are so perfectly primed to realize this opportunity. And they've done a lot of the hard yards, so we can just adopt it and not have to reinvent. So I think if we can look to those countries, we'll be quite smart.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you said, you're already seeing that upswing in the last 18 months where part of the zeitgeist, almost everyone's starting to really tune into this, care more about it, I guess, more consciousness. That's probably a big catalyst as well. I know I mentioned the team were quite excited about this conversation. Parika from our team in particular, and she's putting together some things she was keen for me to ask you. And one of those is, what are some of the biases that maybe you think you need to let go of when it comes to this vision for the future?
Yeah, this was such a good question. I did say to you, I was like, that is a good question. And I think it was a two-part question as well. Like, there's what do I need to let go of, and what I was sharing when I was really thinking about that question is like a lot of our
households need to let go of.
Households and, me individually, we all hold these unconscious biases. And I think, trying to become conscious to what they are, because we have a lived experience, and I've been born in this country, so I'm already immediately blessed, and I, have this color of skin, and that does count a blessing as well. And, there are these things that we carry forward and we have perceptions of that are, imparting bias in how we operate and the view of the world we have. So, I know I carry many, but I think one of the big things is, I think we individually need to let go of the fact that we think we're insignificant sometimes because it's all too big, it's all too opaque, it's all too hard. I think we actually really matter, each and every one of us, and I think we have such a power, but we actually just need to realize it and realize that what we share matters, how we behave matters, the things, our values matter, and we need to communicate them more regularly. Because I often hear people that I just want to live my life, the climate change and global warming's coming. And we get so bogged down in the everyday. And then, we feel like if we just put things in the right bin, that it's insignificant, and we lack trust in the system.
Yeah.
And I think collectively, households and to myself again, I think we all have a tendency and a bias to think that somebody else will do it. Manage it. That magical they, the local government, they need to be doing this. They don't provide that service, remembering that we're all part of this same system. We are one world, we're one economy, we're one species, obviously alongside many other species. But I just think that that whole methodology or thought or bias that, you know, someone else will take care of it is, something we all need to let go of and remember. Then coupled with we all matter, we're not insignificant, and collectively we have a whole bunch of power to create change, but we all need to get behind that new narrative.
There's heaps to think about in there. Something you've just said as well has made me even think, you know, it also doesn't have to be so binary that either you're doing this and you're a real do-gooder, or you're kind of not. Do you know what I mean? Like we all have those days where really good with, I mean, I don't want to come back to just the waste being the example, but that's just when you were talking there, is that's coming up for me. You know, it's like, well, you do the right thing, and then there are other days when, you know, stuff's just going on and maybe you don't. And then you kind of like, then that just puts me, you know, I'm junk at this. I'm in this pile. I can't be that good person. And it's like anything, you know, whether it's your wellness or your mental health or whatever it is, it's, you know, we've got to, I feel like there seems to be on this topic, you know, you're either a do-gooder or you're not, kind of thing. Whereas we're all just these imperfect people in between trying to do a bit more. And just that, as you said, they're having that belief that actually we do have that power, really propels you to want to do it a bit more and have that faith in it.
Oh, yeah. You know, don't beat yourself up if you put it in the wrong bin, or, you know, you don't feel like you're on the community group or the, you know, the parents committee, or the, you know, do what you can do and do it well, you know, and if you fall off the bandwagon, get back up. Perseverance, that all really matters. And I think overall, when we persevere, it speaks to the integrity we have. You know, we're not perfect, we're actually very imperfect. And I think just giving ourselves the time and space to continue in, you know, doing better, not being perfect, is so important. You know, I really struggle, like if I'm, you know, going for a bike ride and I see a piece of litter on the ground, like it eats at me if I don't stop and pick it up, you know, but sometimes I have my 2-year-old screaming and I just can't. And that's being human, and that's also okay, because I might get it the next time and the next time and the next time, you know. So I just think that is such an important message that we need to have. There's no camps here, we're all in the same one. Yeah. Beautiful. That has just been the most enlightening conversation, I think. Just even in that, just for me, like so many kind of dots joined and connections. So thank you so much for going really deep in parts, Ashleigh, as well, but also just giving us I think a really great summary of what this all means, what that possibility is, and even the role we can play as individuals. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, I always like sharing what I can, and just as a very transparent and honest, you know, translation of our journey so far. You know, doing this with my sister and starting with no one's permission from our bedroom floor to where we are today. So I do think it's important to speak to one another about why we do things and what we think might be possible, especially when we believe it's better for all of us.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, and thank you so much again for being on. This has just been a joy, and hopefully we may even hear from you again in the show. We might have to get you and your sister on at one stage and get the whole family act going on.
Yeah, she's the yin and yang, so it should be a whole lot of fun to have on.
Amazing. Thank you again.
Thanks.